Welcome to the S.O.A.P video series from Oak Tree Community Church in South Bend, Indiana. I'm Daniel, this is Gary, and we are working our way through the book of Judges in the Old Testament. Sort of a sad book.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Really. Yeah. As we've seen now, we're in week 3, and we've seen a couple of really good judges at the beginning, an okay judge last week. This week, there's almost nothing to celebrate in chapters 9 through 12. It looks like there should be, but there's almost nothing to celebrate.
My note says it gets messy.
That is the understatement of the book.
Yeah, but like we talked about last week, what we're seeing in Judges is a repetitive pattern. And that pattern is everything's right with the world, so let's go do something different, right? Let's go away from God. Let's start worshiping other idols. God then gets mad.
Yep.
Bad things happen to Israel.
Usually because of some kind of outside force, outside nation,
that comes
oppression or invasion.
That happens for a while. God takes pity because the nation of Israel is saying, help us, type of thing. Sometimes there's some kind of getting back in with God. God will raise up a deliverer or a judge in the case of Judges, and the judge so far has had victory over whatever the problem was, and then the land has peace for X number of years, and then we start it again.
All over again.
Yep. And last week it was peace for 40 years, which meant a whole generation was gone. And then at the end of Gideon, I think it was another 30 or some years. Yeah. So we're now like 30 years later.
Yeah. So 30, 40 years. So Gideon had several wives and 70 sons, right?
Right.
But he also had a concubine. Right. And his concubine, basically a non-wife, right? So any children from the concubine were not going to get any of the inheritance. Right. Okay.
Right. Yeah. So the first son gets a double share, blah, blah, blah. Right. This guy, if there's 70 sons, he's 70th.
Yeah.
Right.
He's actually
71st.
71st, right on the food chain, right? So he's from an area called Shechem. His name, now last week you mentioned that they offered a Gideon to be the king, and he said, no, I'm not going to be king, right?
Right.
Well, he named this kid Abimelech, which means my father is king. So he's not going to be king, but he's going to,
Well, after 70 kids, maybe he's like, all right, I'm king.
Yeah, king of his own little realm, something. Yeah. But this becomes a really big issue because Gideon's 70 sons are sort of judging and ruling and taking care of Israel for the 40 years. Right. Right? And then he dies and everything. But there's no one guy.
Right. Right.
And Abimelech grows up and says,
I'm going to be the guy.
I should be the guy.
Yeah, so he goes back to his hometown. Yeah. Shouldn't I be the guy?
Well, yeah.
You should be the guy.
Your relative. Right. I'm your blood relative. Why would you, go with these other 70 when I'm the guy? Right.
I need some money for my campaign. So the town gives him 70 shekels, I think it was.
Out of the treasury of the local god. Out of the treasure. So this was mixing religion and politics. Yeah. We're going to take some of this money from the temple treasury or the shrine treasury, and we're going to fund your campaign.
Okay. And Abimelech puts it to great use. He hires some people to kill the 70 brothers.
Yeah. He hires...
One of them gets away.
He hires
So it must cost 1 shekel.
Ruthless people, it says. Some ruthless guys.
So one of the youngest brothers hid and did get away. And Abimelech was made king of Israel.
Yeah. Well, king over at least the people who wanted him to be king. I mean,
not everybody
was fine. He was not king over all of Israel. He was king over this little area, this tribe of people.
Then I thought later it said he was king.
Yeah.
So the younger brother speaks to a crowd, and he uses a good analogy that has a tree in it. But at the end of the day, it comes with a curse. Yeah. And it was, if you have shown loyalty and integrity when making this guy the king,
that's fine.
Good for you. Yep. And if you haven't, then may a fire blaze from him that consumes you.
and may you consume him. It would sort of like this, eat each other almost, right?
Right. So the leaders of that town, they actually rebelled against this guy.
Yep.
And some new guys came into town and started making rattling their sabers.
Yep.
And said, "Hey, we'll get rid of this guy for everybody." Well, of course, in the town, so one of the commissioners sent word to Abimelech, "Hey, there's some problems going on. You better come here and set an ambush."
Yeah.
So the ambush is set, and he ends up capturing the whole city.
Yeah.
And killing everyone.
Yeah.
And knocking everything down, and so much as putting salt over everything, so nothing will grow there.
Nothing will grow. I mean, it's desolate at this point, and Abimelech seems like he is winning.
Right. So he moves on to the next town, and it's a tower of.
It's a tower. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like a tower. They call it the Tower of Shechem.
Yeah. And 1,000 people are in there.
He sets the thing on fire so that
Right.
they can't get out.
Right.
So he basically bakes them in this tower, assuming it's stone or whatever, not going to burn, but it, maybe the inside's going to burn and they.
Right. And he kills everyone.
They all die.
Yeah. So he moves on to the next place. The guy's like on a roll here, right? So he moves on to the next place, and he's actually stopped and killed there.
Yep.
So interestingly enough, he was going up some stairs. There's a woman on top that had a millstone. She drops the millstone down, crushes him, but doesn't kill him.
Yeah.
So he gets some guy to kill him because either one of two things: he didn't want to be captured alive and had anything bad happen to him, or two, he didn't want to be killed by a woman.
Or probably a little bit of both.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
So the bad guy's now dead.
So Gideon's youngest son, the curse actually happened.
Right.
Abimelech killed them, and they killed him. Basically, they ended up destroying each other.
Yep. And right.
Right.
Yeah, and he killed them.
Yeah.
Right. So it was repayment for the 70 sons that were killed.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And then basically for the next almost 50 years, the nation has peace again.
Right. So click. But unlike other ones where they're defeating a foreign enemy,
it was really internal.
Internal. Like you said, it's this whole downward spiral.
Yeah.
So we're in chapter 10 now. Like you said, 43 years have gone by. Another cycle starts. And guess what? The people start worshiping Baal.
Yep.
The Lord was mad, gave them over to their enemies. This time it's the Philistines and the Amorites.
Yep.
Right. They oppressed Israel for 18 years. And God was so fed up, he wasn't listening to people's cries.
Yep.
So people got serious. They removed the other gods.
That was
came
the thing.
came back to their God, and God grew tired of Israel's suffering.
Yeah.
So next you would expect a deliverer to be raised up, some kind of fight to happen, and peace.
Yep.
So the Amorites were assembled in a place called Gilead. That was the name of the land, right?
Yep.
And the Israelites were in a different camp, close but far away.
Yeah.
And the Israelites didn't have a leader yet.
Right.
So they just had people.
Yeah.
And they picked a leader. Hey, we want this guy. And help me with the name.
Jephthah.
Jephthah.
Yep.
All right. So he was a Gilead warrior. His mother was a prostitute, but his dad was Gilead.
Yeah.
Right? So family name?
Probably family name. Yeah. From the area, it passed down. So he was... had his mother not been a prostitute, he probably would have been like royalty was probably too strong of a word, but like
big guy,
noble,
big fish of the sea.
Yeah, right.
But small sea.
His mom was a prostitute, and so his dad was a big wig, or his family was a big wig, but he was the outcast of the family.
Yeah, in fact, he got kicked out of the family, much like we saw before.
Yep.
So this guy gets kicked out. He basically starts his own gang.
His own gang, right? Yeah, sort of like Abimelech did.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking like a lot of mirrors going on here.
Yep. So now the Ammonites are waiting to start a war, and the Israelites are scared to death, and these guys who kicked their brother out go, hey, we should hire a brother.
Yeah.
He should come back.
He's got a pretty tough...
Our half-brother.
Yeah,
I'm
he's
not
got
sure
a pretty tough gang over there, right?
Yeah, and of course the brother said, wait, you kicked me out. Now you want me back? Yeah, we'll pledge our loyalty to you.
Right.
And we'll make you king. We'll make you the leader. Okay.
I love his first tact. He does not go in swinging. He does not go in, with his army. He takes a very diplomatic approach at the outset.
Yeah, and I find it very interesting from the standpoint of, not that I hear this question all the time, but I certainly had this question. And the question is, Israel is in Egypt. They come down. They're going to the promised land. That's great. There's already people there.
Right.
Don't they have a right to that land?
Yeah.
And I generally say no, because God said they don't. And two, in the 40 years that it took them to actually get there, people knew they were coming, and they had plenty of time to leave.
Right. And even when they did get there under Joshua, they had another 5 years or more to leave.
Yeah.
And when Joshua, went into Jericho, for instance, Rahab said, "We are scared. We know you're coming. We're scared. Why are you scared?" "Well, we heard what God did for you at the Red Sea." That was 40 years ago. You're still scared about. Okay.
Yeah, right.
This is like, all right.
Right. So like you said, both sides are having a discussion. So there's a messenger. I don't know if it's the same messenger, right?
But
going back and forth. But it's basically, hey, why do you want to attack us? And then the Amorites answer, "You stole our land, right? After you left Egypt, you took our land. All we want you to do is give it back peacefully."
Yeah.
Which sounds like it's right.
Sounds, yeah.
Yep. Except then they got a history lesson.
Yeah, and
Right?
I love this. Jephthah schools them
Yeah.
on Israel's history. He's like, hold on a second.
Right.
We've been here for 300 years, and now you're deciding to pick a fight?
Yeah. And when Moses first got here, he was traveling through their land and actually sent people to ask, can we come through your land?
Yep.
You said no. We said, can we just stay on the roads? You said no. And then you attacked us.
Right. So we defended ourselves and won.
Yeah. So rightfully took this land.
So yeah, it's not like we just came in and took it. This was a battle. This was a war. We won the war, and now we've been here for 300 years. Which, a couple of things. First of all, I love the fact that he took the diplomatic approach.
Yeah.
I love the fact that he used history, that he
Which you wouldn't
explained
take out of
the
a guy who
whole
has a
thing.
gang.
Right, yeah. You're not thinking this
Yeah.
is a gang way of doing
And so
it.
he knew history and he knew God.
Right. The other thing I like about this is that actually there's a relevance that it brings it in today. Okay? Because, people today, Israel took over this land, or, the Palestinians have been there and Israel doesn't belong there and all this, right? That's the exact same thing that they were saying back then. Back then, Jephthah said, we've been here for 300 years, and God gave it to us, and it was self-defense, and we conquered and we won. Today, now it's been 3,400 years, 3,500 years that they've been there. You don't just get to say, Israel is the occupier here. This has been Israel's land for 3.5 millennia.
Right. Yeah. Well, I love the other one that it said, plus, have your God give you the land back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Let's make it a war of gods, if you really want this. The other thing that this does, when he mentions 300 years, one of the things we talked about a couple of weeks ago is that, it's sort of hard to place the timeline exactly. We know about when it starts, we know about when it ends, but where everybody is in here. When Jephthah says we've been here for 300 years,
it's probably 300 years.
we can put that on the timeline. We know, pretty close to where things are going. So.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, the Lord's Spirit comes on Jephthah. And as he got closer to the battle, I don't know if he was getting scared, what was going on here, but he made a vow to God.
Yeah.
And he said, if you let me succeed,
the first person that I see coming out of my house when I get back home.
Thanks. I will offer as a burnt sacrifice.
Yeah.
God didn't ask for this.
And in fact, God doesn't want it.
Right.
But he made a vow to God.
Right. So you make a vow to God. God delivers on his side. He won big time, took over around 20, 30 cities, well, whatever it was, goes home. His only daughter comes out.
Yep. I'm sure he's expecting one of the servants, one of his gang members, something like, I don't need any more gang members.
Yep.
But yeah, his only daughter. So now what is he supposed to do?
Right. Well, that's the deal, right? Do you live up to your promise and vow that you made God, who came through on his side of it, or do you make up some kind of excuse?
Yeah.
So he explains to his daughter what's going on. She seems oddly receptive to it, and she asks if she could have 2 months.
Yeah. So this gets really controversial because obviously God, throughout the Old Testament, does not want human sacrifice, does not like human sacrifice. That's one of the things the pagans did, and he said was abominable to him. So he doesn't want it. But yeah, Jephthah has this vow that he made. And so some people say, oh, well, so he never actually killed her. She just lived out the rest of her life as a virgin, right? Because that's in here, right? They mourned her virginity or whatever. But it says, it flat out says he did what he said he was going to do.
Right.
So I think he really did do it.
That's the way I took it.
So here's the thing. Israel is so far away from God at this point that Jephthah did not know that built into the Mosaic law, you could promise your child, especially a firstborn, to God and redeem that with money. You could actually not buy it off, not a bribe, but God actually put it in there that said, if you give me X amount of shekels or whatever, that will fulfill your vow.
Right.
He had already planned, he had already put it in there. Jephthah did not have to kill her, even though I believe he did. God had already not figured out, but God had already placed a way.
A way to get her back.
Yeah.
Right.
They were so far from God that they didn't even know the law. He didn't bother talking to a priest to arbitrate it. Right. He didn't bother to do any of that stuff. He's just like, well, I guess I made the vow. I have to do it. And everybody seemed fine with it.
Right.
That's how far away from
Even
God
the
they
daughter.
were. Yeah. And we're only halfway through the book.
Yeah. Right. So then we have chapter 12. And
this is like deja vu.
Yeah. So last week we were talking about the
Ephraimites, right? Yeah.
And how there was a war that happened, and they were mad because they weren't asked to be part of it.
Yeah.
Right. So now the Ephraimites are mad again because there was a war, and how dare you fight without us? which is hilarious.
Well, the thing is this is like 100 years after last time.
Yeah.
By
so
the
now
time
they're really mad.
You add up the land was at rest for all these years, right?
Yeah.
This is like 100 years, maybe more, and it's the same tribe with the same problem.
Right. Well, and we're laughing about it, but this started a civil war.
It did,
and 42,000 of the Ephraimites died.
Yeah, and the thing is Jephthah said,
number.
"I did ask for your help, and you didn't want to help.
That's twice.
Doesn't matter.
Right.
We still wanted to do it.
Right, but at the real end of the day, order was restored, and Israel was at a relative peace for 31 years.
Yeah.
So another end of a cycle.
And this 31 years was multiple. Judges is the term we're using, but there's several names
that are in there.
Not well-known names. Right.
They did something. Right?
Yeah. They helped. Right. Yeah. And what's interesting is each one of them had large family. It's 30 sons or some daughters or whatever that rode around on donkeys, and that's important because they would cover the land. So it wasn't just one guy. It wasn't just dad who was the judge or the king or whatever. Yeah. His family sort of helped keep things, arbitrate and keep things. See, but that was the job of the priests. That was the job of the Levites. So the structure that God had set up, even though he was allowing them peace, even though he was allowing them to, live in the land or whatever, protect them, they still were not following the structure that was supposed to be there. The Levites were supposed to be mediating and serving the people. The priests were supposed to be there to help with the sacrifices. Instead, we've got Ibzan and his 30 sons. Okay, it's better than nothing, but it's not what it was supposed to be.
Right. Nice. So that's the end of chapter 12. Right? And we're working our way through it.
Yeah.
I peeked ahead. A famous guy is coming up next week.
Famous guys next week. And
Might have something to do with muscles,
Yeah.
and strength, and
doesn't get much better, to be honest. I mean, that's,
well, yeah. I was gonna say you always think of it as such a positive story, but
yeah.
even Samson's not positive.
Yeah, it's really not. Yeah, so we'll do Samson next time, and you know, quite a bit more well known. Gideon and Samson, maybe Jephthah a little bit, or some of the most well known parts of Judges. Right. So we hit some well known stuff, but yeah, this isn't getting any better. It's actually getting worse each time. So same thing as last time. Read it. Read it carefully. We're hitting some of the highlights, obviously, and trying to bring out some of the historical context and things that are important to understand as you're reading through it. But yeah, like Gary said, it's this cycle that we're just going through over and over, and it's not getting any better.
Right.
So we don't want to be that way. Of course, we don't want our families and our churches to be that way. Let's take this as a warning for ourselves of how things can be when humans just go away from God. And let's not do that. So share it with your friends and family. Let this be a warning to everybody. Send your questions and comments our way, and we'll see you back here next time.
Bye, everybody.